really hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, like, and click the bell to be notified of more fantastic music content just like this. Welcome to the Need to Know Music Show with me, Ronan McManus, here on Switchbox TV. And today I'm joined by a singer, songwriter, poet, author from Nashville, who is about to release his second album, South of the Sky. And he was named by Rolling Stone Country as an artist you need to know. Well, this is the Need to Know Music Show, so it's a perfect marriage. So how are you, Matt Urmy? How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
It's a cool setup you've got there behind you, because by a few electronics and a few bits and pieces going on there.
Oh yeah. This is my little
man cave.
Yeah, my little music lab.
This is where the magic happens.
Right.
So how's this year been for you? It's been a very strange year all round, really. But how's it been for you?
It's been good. It's had its challenges. The hardest part about it is just sort of the overall vibe in this country due to some of the leadership challenges we're having.
We have similar ones, yeah.
yeah. I count myself really lucky, though. I have a job with my company where I can work from pretty much anywhere. So and we work remotely anyway. So there was no real transition we had to make to go to work remote. We were already there. So I feel really lucky because of that. And I know there's a lot of people who are really struggling. So all in all, it's been good, but weird. It's a strange year.
Absolutely. I mean, you have been releasing new music. Literally, October we saw 2 singles from you with the album. Yeah. Was the album always planned for next year, or did it end up being next year?
Well, it just sort of ended up. The timing just sort of ended up because we finally finished tracking and mixing and everything in July, and so.
Oh, okay. So it's still quite recent.
Oh yeah, and because of the content in some of the songs, I was like, let's put this out right now. Let's not wait. There's no reason to wait. And even though we decided like, okay, we'll wait till January to drop the whole thing, some of these songs felt like they needed to be out now, while all this was going on, because they felt relevant.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a sort of change in sound, from the first record, and I actually don't want to get into that quite yet, because we're going to do a bit of that a bit later on, because we're going to try and do a bit of a move through your life a little bit, just to try and sort of set the scene a little bit. But so we're talking about your early years as you're growing up, your childhood. Was there music always around you in those early years?
Yeah, to a degree. In the early years, just a lot of records being played. My dad is an avid blues fan, and so lots of B.B. King, lots of Muddy Waters, and the Everly Brothers feature heavily in my early childhood. If I had to remember, the earliest albums I listened to was the Everly Brothers, B.B. King, and Albert King. So that's definitely indelible in my mind.
Excellent. Yeah. So what sort of age did you start to pick up music as a thing? To start to perform?
I think around 5th grade. So I guess that's around the age of like 11. I had a good friend of mine at the time who actually was the producer on South of the Sky. We started writing our first songs together at about age 11 or 12.
What were those songs like?
Oh, they were awful. They were awful romance,
That's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear.
They were awful. They were about, the two of us, having a crush on the same girl in school or something, and us being just totally upset about it.
But those are pressing issues when you're like 11. These are the important things.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And we grew up in Nashville, so it was once we got to the point where we were writing songs, then we realized that it was all around us, and a lot of our friends had parents who were professional studio musicians, or they had parents who worked at a record company or something like that. So it exploded on us, our consciousness sort of at that early age, that we were in a music town.
Yeah, I suppose it's like the local industry. Like if your local industry is a mine, you go into mining. If it's a metal works or something, you go into that. Besides Nashville, did you feel that was just kind of, it was just all around you? That was the natural progression for you to go into music?
Yeah, for me, for sure. For sure. I was totally hypnotized by what was happening. By the time I got into junior high and secondary school, high school, you know, parents of my friends who played in studios, like the drummer from my high school band's father was a session player who would let me come and sit in while he was doing a session for you know, a track for Shania Twain or something like that. And
wow.
so, you know, getting to sit in and see those professionals work and the vibe in a real studio, it just becomes completely infectious. And you're like, oh, this is what I need to do the rest of my life for sure.
Yeah, you got completely seduced by the whole thing. I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I grew up in a real musical house, so every night was a gig in our house. My dad was a singer, all my brothers musicians, so it was just kind of, it's just, you get the bug. So what was the first proper gig? What sort of age were you when you did your first proper gig, and what was the setup like? Was it a solo thing? Was there a band?
Definitely a band. We started a band, me and the producer from South of the Sky. We were in our first band together, and I think our first gig was like playing at at a church function or something like that, where we were brought in to, you know, sort of be the band for the songs everybody was going to sing, and then we started doing our own shows that we would promote at our schools on the weekends or something like that, and our friends would come and stand there awkwardly and watch us try to play our instruments, to be kind and supportive.
Did you have an embarrassing band name at that time?
Yes. It almost pains me to talk about it. So we went through several. I think the worst band name that we had was after a Dr. Seuss book, Sam I Am. That was one name. And then we had a band name called, which was had to do with the church we were part of at the time, but it was called Martha's Thirst. It's a very sort of emo, sad teenager, emo pop band name.
Excellent.
And we lived up to it with the music. It was very sad emo. You know, it was wild because, you know, we wrote all these sad songs. Looking back, we wrote all these sad songs when we were at that age, and we came from such privileged background where it was like, you know, I look back and it's like, what did we have to be sad about? We had nothing to be sad about. So it's interesting looking back on that.
Yeah, I mean, like with this the show was predominantly set up for up and coming musicians, and I love talking about from established musicians those early years and all the ingredients that all this stuff goes into making you the artist that you are. So it's already these are really important steps, and you find the boundaries of some more often than not. You find the boundaries of what you don't want to do more than what you do want to do in those ages. That certainly with the terrible song lyrics and things like that are always good to look back on. But it's all part of the process, isn't it?
That's right. And you know, to that point, you know, it became clear to me early on that as amazing as it was to witness, I did not want to become a studio musician. You know, the older we got in high school, we started to get pressure from some of those parents that were in the industry that, oh, you need to get your chops up. If the only way you're going to make money is if you're playing session guitars for all these guys, and you need to practice and you need to learn all this and that. And I really resisted that. I didn't want anything to do with that world. I wanted to make my own music my own way. And when I was 16, I snuck out of the house on a school night, and I drove down to Vanderbilt University, which is the big college here in Nashville. And I had seen a sign for a fraternity party. I believe this is in 1993, maybe 1993, that the Dave Matthews Band was playing at the Kappa Alpha House or something at Vanderbilt. And so I drove down in the middle of the night and snuck into the fraternity party and watched this band on this teeny little stage, you know, out back behind this fraternity house. And when I saw that band at that period of time, that's when I feel like my brain exploded. And I said, that is what I want to do. I don't want to be a session player. I want to be a weirdo like these guys. And I want to play super weird music and be really, really creative the rest of my life. That really blew my mind, because it was the first time I'd ever heard sounds like that, where you had a saxophone and a violin and a acoustic guitar and this insane drummer with a jazz bassist, and it was just like, it was like everything just melted.
Your mind must have just gone like opened to all this possibility. Do you think?
Oh yeah,
That's quite, I think that's quite an interesting point, that almost the kind of the music industry side of Nashville could actually be a negative in terms of a path. You know, I mean,
yeah,
I can certainly relate to that. My dad was a gigging musician who did gigs, and he taught us how to make it a living. Whereas my older brother kind of went for the record deal side of things and made it and did all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of, we were dragged down this idea of making a living. And I think that's, and the two things don't go hand in hand. You know, it's one of those, one's based on just working hard. And the other side is kind of, you know, and the other side is all the creative side. So I thought that's a really interesting side of it, you know. So what happened then after you saw Dave Matthews Band? What were you going back? Did you start to make plans in your mind then? You just started to think, like, I don't know, where did your mind go at that time?
Well, that's when I started listening to, you know, as much music like that as I could. I really got out of the sort of country world that I've been brought up in, the sort of pop country world, where that was my big exposure. And I started listening to REM and listening to Michael Stipe's lyrics and listening to, you know, a lot of these bands that were coming out at the time, like Dave Matthews Band and the Counting Crows and REM and Nirvana and all of these, and it just was like a rabbit hole for me. And I went down that indie rock alternative, I guess is what they called it at the time, alternative rock rabbit hole until I got to college. And then that's when in those years is when I really started to discover what I'd missed about my early years in the 80s, where I was obsessed with Michael Jackson and music like that. And I started learning about, you know, a lot of the bands back then that, you know, I got into Sinead O'Connor and I got into Depeche Mode and I got into Duran Duran and a lot of these other earlier acts with electronic music. And, you know, it just kept expanding and expanding from there. And college was where we, you know, again, was playing with the same, you know, co-writer, Matt, you know, from my childhood, who produced South of the Sky. And we just were on this like musical odyssey of just trying to learn as much as we could, but never, ever put too much intention or thought into commerciality. It was all about just the art. And we really were turned off by the business side of it that we saw in Nashville growing up as kids, all the pressure. And
yeah, I think you can really end up chasing your tail a bit too much when you're trying to write for something you think people are going to like to hear, rather than it sounds like a cliche to say you've got to write what, you know, for yourself, but you do. I mean, it's just, you have to make yourself happy first and make sure you're being true to the things you want to say. But did you feel like you were finding your own voice and you finding what you wanted to say or how you wanted to say it?
Not until I really, in those early bands, I mostly played guitar, and I would sort of co-write the music, but I didn't do any singing, and I didn't do a lot of lyric writing. I wrote a lot of poetry for myself, but didn't really apply that to the band. But when the band fell apart towards the end of our college years, I went into this sort of singer-songwriter rabbit hole where for the first time I discovered a lot of the storytellers like John Prine and Johnny Cash and Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark and people who became major heroes of mine. And I spent 4 or 5 years in my 20s just following their footsteps and writing songs on acoustic guitar. And that's when I really tried to find a voice in a lyrical thing that was my own. And that led to, you know, what you mentioned, how South of the Sky is so different than the previous record. You know, that sort of singer-songwriter series culminated in Out of the Ashes, which was a very sort of Americana singer-songwriter country-ish album.
Well, this brings us on to kind of meeting Cowboy Jack Clement. I mean, so I mean, you spent all this time kind of expanding your musical mind, and then to meet, you know, somebody like a character like him, who's obviously done so many things, you know, with such an amazing character. I mean, what was that like? You must have just kind of felt like you'd done enough growing at this point. Now suddenly, bang, you're opened up again.
Oh, well, at that point, I had realized that I was never going to stop growing. At that point, even
Yeah.
just studying like John Prine and people like that, I was like, and Leonard Cohen, name them. There's so many to name, but if I could ever write one song like one of these guys, I would have to like study at it my whole life, is how I felt. And I actually, most of those years, didn't know about Cowboy. I learned about him later on through a mutual friend in Nashville. And then I saw him play at this little honky tonk in downtown Nashville during the Americana Music Festival. And I immediately decided I have to see if I can sit down with this guy. And because I started reading about him. And so I cold called him on the phone. I got his number. There was a manager here in town who I begged and pleaded with to give me his home phone number. And finally they broke down and gave it to me, sort of saying, don't tell him where you got this, but here you go. And so I called him one day at like 3:00 in the afternoon, and I introduced myself and said, you don't know me, but I'm a massive fan. And I'm doing this show, and I want you to be my guest of honor at this show downtown. And he said, I expected him to politely say no or hang up on me. But he said, well, why don't you come over to the house right now and we'll talk about it. And so
wow.
I went over there, and it was like stepping into a time capsule going through his front door. The shag carpet from the 70s and this giant portrait on the wall of him and one of him and Johnny Cash. And it felt like nothing had been touched since the late 60s inside that house. And everybody was still smoking inside the house. And so it smelled like, cigarettes and booze and country music. And I sat down with him, and we had a glass of wine, and we talked for 2 or 3 hours. And at the end of it, I just thought to myself, I am in love with this man, and I want to know everything, learn everything I can from him. I just want to sit at his feet and absorb everything that he has, if he'll let me.
Yeah.
And that's what started that whole thing.
So you started doing some recordings with him, is that right? You kind of, but he's kind of, how did that all sort of develop into actually going from meeting him to kind of just learning from him to actually let's do some recording?
Well, he was a character, and he was an extremely flamboyant, animated man. And even at that age, at the time, I believe he was 78, and he was still extremely, flamboyant. And he liked the idea of being the guest of honor at a show. And so he agreed to do the show after our couple hours of conversation. And so I put everything I had into making that a really amazing night. And it ended up being an amazing night. We sold the club out, and it was just a real special evening. And the next day he called me to come over to his house that morning. And when I walked into his bedroom, he was sitting there in his bedroom at a table in front of a television that had the news on, in his boxer shorts and nothing else. And he was writing on a legal pad, and he was scribbling away. He tore the pages off this yellow legal pad and folded them up, and he stuck them in the breast pocket of my shirt. And he said, come with me. And so he gets up from his desk in his underwear and waddles up he opens up this closet door in the hallway. And then there's a staircase going up, and the walls and the stairs are painted sky blue with clouds all over them. And so we're walking up this stairway of blue paint and white clouds, and we get to the top in this giant attic, and it's a music studio. And there's a huge analog deck sitting there and a tape machine. And on one wall from the floor to the ceiling are bookshelves of 2-inch analog master tapes, and the names written on these cases. It's like there were 8 of them from Johnny Cash, and 3 of them that said Dolly and Porter, and 4 of them that said Emmylou Harris and Alison Krauss and John Prine and Hank Williams. I mean, it was like, holy shit, this guy's got like the Hall of Fame on reel-to-reel master tapes on bookshelves in his attic. And he shows me around the studio, and we're sitting there having a cigarette together at the control deck, just talking. And he said, do you have enough songs to make an album? To which I answered, of course I do, yes.
Of course, yeah. Even if you ask you that question, you say yes.
Yes, and you go home and you write your ass off.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. And so I said yes, and he said, well, would you want to do one here? I had a lot of fun. He said, the only stipulation is you have to use the backing band that backed us up last night. I really love that band. And it was this amazing band of just ace players in Nashville. You know, Dave Jakes, who's John Prine's bass player. He played with him for years. Kenny Vaughn, who's played with everybody. Paul Griffith on the drums, Mike Webb on organ. It was just this really amazing band of Nashville kick-ass players. And so I said, done, let's go, let's do it. And that kicked off, you know, like a few month process where we cut tracks live in his attic. And that was the record.
So what year was this? What year was all this?
So this happened in 2010. We cut the album in 2010 in 2 weekends, whole thing live, vocals, everything. And then we started mixing the next year. And then in the spring of that year, 2011, is when his house caught fire and the entire thing burned down in the studio and everything was lost. All of those reel-to-reel tapes, the deck, all of the tracks that I had recorded, even the digital copies, the hard drives, everything melted. So it was gone. And that was that.
I mean, what was that feeling like? I mean, must have been absolutely devastating.
For him, for me.
I mean, it's his home. Like,
I was in a movie with my partner and our son, and we come out of the theater and there's a voicemail on my phone that says, "Matt, I'm so sorry to hear about what's happening at Cowboys." And so I looked at the news. You know, I frantically searched like Cowboy Jack, what's happening, and there was a news flash that said his house was on fire. So I drove straight there, and the fire department had the whole block blocked off. And I jumped out of my car and I lied to them and I said, "That's my grandfather's house." And so they let me through. And I ran into the backyard and they were Cowboy and Eileen, his partner, and his kids, and John Prine and a few other people. They were all sitting in the backyard and the house was still on fire. It was still burning. And, you know, and I said, "Jack, what can I do? Is there anything I can do?" And I asked Eileen, I said, what do you need? And she said, "We need somebody to go get Jack's medication from the pharmacy." So I hopped back in my car and I ran and I grabbed his prescriptions and I came back. And then we just sat there and we watched the house burn down. And I asked him if he needed anything. I'll never forget it. I sat down next to him. He was wearing a bathrobe because he had been asleep, and a friend had come over just to check on him and noticed smoke coming out of the air vents. And so he pulled him out of his bed. And so he was in his underwear and a bathrobe, which was covered in imprints of Elvis Presley, by the way. Amazing, like silk Elvis Presley bathrobe. And I said, "Jack, what do you need?" And he looked at me with these like bloodshot, tear-filled eyes. And he said, "I need a new world." And it was intense. And so I didn't even think about our record. The next morning I went over there and it was raining and I was helping them grab computers and anything we could find out of the rubble. And, it was like, this man just lost his entire world. And so I didn't even think about my album for a week or two. And then it was like, oh, fuck, that thing's gone. And I was still going and seeing him almost every day, and we'd sit on the porch and we'd talk and we'd smoke cigarettes. And I just thought to myself, well, hey, to hell with it. If all I got out of this is this new friendship and this mentor that I'm learning from, so be it. The album, whatever. And then it was 2 years later that his mixing engineer called me and said, "Matt, we just heard back from a data recovery company in California where we sent off all the melted external hard drives, and they took them apart and they reassembled them, and we got 5 albums back, and your tracks are one of them."
Wow.
And we have all the original tracks, but we lost all the overdubs. So if you want to come in and finish the project and try to and remix it, we can do that. And
man, that is absolutely crazy.
It was crazy. It was so crazy. And so we did. We went in and we finished it. And that's when I wrote the song Out of the Ashes for Jack and asked John if he would come sing on it. Due to their close relationship and the fact that he was there with us in the backyard during the fire. And that was a cool story. I emailed John, I asked him, and he wrote back. He said, "Hey, I'm in Dublin, or I'm at our house in Ireland," because John's wife was Irish. So they would go there a lot, and he said, "We're over here, but send me a WAV file of it, because I've got a buddy in the next village who has a studio. I'll go over there and sing the vocal for you and send it back."
Oh, wow.
So here's John Prine, for little old nobody me, going over to the next village in Northern Ireland to sing vocals on this track for Jack, because he loved Jack so much. And I'll never forget the day I got it back. I was at work in my office, and it was just a WAV file. It was an a cappella vocal track of John Prine singing. He sang the entire song because he didn't know how I wanted to use it. So he sang every word of the song. And I still have that a cappella WAV file of John's voice singing that song.
Of course we lost John this year.
And we lost
John Prine this year. So I mean, it's even more special now. These things become more poignant, don't they? I mean, what was your first thought when you heard about John Prine's passing?
Oh, I was just devastated. When I heard he had COVID, I thought to myself, oh fuck, because he had so many pre-existing conditions. I immediately knew it was going to be a massive battle for him to get through COVID. So I can't say I was surprised to learn that he had passed, but I was devastated to learn that he had passed, because you just think of all the ways for a man like that, who's so deeply beloved, for him to die from something like COVID-19 in a pandemic just really sucks. Really sucks for him to go out that way and not be around his friends and his family. And I was the least of these, when you think about his friends, I wasn't his best buddy, but I just feel for him and his family that's the way it had to end. For Fiona and the kids, it's just terrible.
So it's a huge legacy he's left with influencing musicians. I mean, the amount of huge names that have come out with great words about him, and just an amazing person. Oh
yeah, nobody wrote like him. His mind and his voice and his way of looking at the world is just completely original.
So you've got John Prine on this album, which has kind of literally come out of the ashes. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
And so then Cowboy Jack passes away as well back in 2013 or something.
Yeah.
So the album still no one's heard this album yet at this point.
Yeah, with Jack's death, I didn't, at the time, I thought, well, because I had just started this company, Artist Growth, that I was running, which I had started that company after the fire because I believed that the album was gone. And so a friend of mine and I started this company and this venture, and I got deep into doing that. And so when the album was salvaged, I said, yes, I want to finish it, but we'll have to do it at night and on the weekends because I'm like up to my eyeballs in this new venture that I started. And then he passed in 2013. And I thought to myself, I just can't put this out until I feel like I can actually support it and promote it and tell the story. And I thought Artist Growth, I'm sure I'll build it up and sell it in a couple of years anyway, so I'll just wait. And then fast forward 4 more years, it's 2017, and I, no end in sight in Artist Growth, and it's turned into a much larger company. And I finally just said, fuck it, I'm just going to put it out. Even though I can't go on tour, I can't do anything, I'm just going to put it out because it's got Jack singing We Must Believe in Magic on it, which was the first song he and I, played together. And then it's got John Prine on it. And I can't just sit on it anymore.
The story behind the album, you're thinking, the story itself, even, to do a few interviews and a bit of promo around it, even if you couldn't have got behind and really toured it properly, surely that's enough to warrant to hear. People are going to want to hear this.
Yeah.
So this is so you didn't come out until 2017, is right? It was right. You released it in 2017.
That's right.
So what was
7 years after we recorded it originally? 7 years. And and I had evolved by that point, and I wasn't, doing the singer-songwriter thing at that time. Even I was starting to really delve into electronic music and melding a singer-songwriter spoken word thing that I love to do with, droning synths and all this other gear that, you can see some of it back here. And
Yeah.
And so here I was promoting this Americana country album, very traditional Americana country album, and telling the story of what we had done 7 years earlier. And I was already writing South of the Sky, which was a very different animal. So I had completely turned the page creatively, in terms of where I was in the moment. It was a little bizarre.
But it was what a great snapshot of a time which was obviously such an important time for you as an artist, as a person.
Oh yeah.
To have that kind of an amazing snapshot with such an amazing story behind it and everything that went on, and now that we've lost John Prine as well, it's even more poignant to it.
Yeah.
So it's just but it is a great album. Lyrically, it's going to take a good few listens to even scratch the surface of it, because there's a lot of lyrics in there. There's the style of it is very. Trying to think about what to ask you about those lyrics, because it's like I can't ask you. I don't know, but there's just, what were the influences that went into that kind of, was you were bringing your poetry through the storytelling thing, and there's so what were your memories about the lyrical content of that album?
It's just like a melting pot of all the poets and the writers that I've listened to over the years, that have really impacted me. I got into, like I said, all those Texas storytellers, and then the Guy Clarks and Towns Van Zants, and then the Nashville guys like Prine and Johnny Cash. And I mean, there's just too many to name, even like Shel Silverstein, and there's that. And then, some of the spoken word slam poetry thing that had happened in the early 2000s that I fell into, where artists like Saul Williams and Andrea Gibson and others had just blown my mind with their command of language and the way they put it to rhythm, even with no music. And so I just was taking bits and pieces of all these things and trying to just, tell interesting stories. And I always tell people, I joke about it, but it's really true. The reason I sort of lean onto this sort of talk sing style of performing is I feel like I'm not a good singer, so I kind of just fall back on this, I'm half talking because I feel real comfortable talking. And so I kind of talk and then maybe throw a little melody in for good measure, and then kind of go back to talking and storytelling. And it just evolved into that on this album, where there's a whole lot of it. And there's a lot of it on South of the Sky, I think, too. It's just sort of a thing I've fallen into, I guess, for my insecurity of not being able to sing.
I'm sure that isn't true.
Well,
give yourself a chance. Maybe one day we'll see you. Maybe one day we'll see you doing some opera or something, and just prove yourself wrong.
Yeah, maybe. That's a good challenge. I'd love to do some opera. If I could pull it off, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Well, that's a nice segue into talking about the South of the Sky album. So it's kind of weird, because, as you said, you had this kind of snapshot of 2010, released in 2017. So it kind of overlaps the development into what becomes this album. But there's definitely a marked difference in production, and as you mentioned, the electronic influences coming to the fore. Tell us a little bit about the two. There's Raging Hearts and Ghost of an Old Revolution were the two singles that came out in October. I'm assuming that the timing of getting the two out so soon had something to do with the election and the kind of the political situation going on. I know it's going to be, because I know, but as we speak now, it's Monday, the day before the election.
Tomorrow, tomorrow.
By the time it goes out, this will have. I don't know. The world may have blown up by then. We don't know. But was it to do with the build up of all the political thing that's been going on in the year? Did you feel like you mentioned before, you felt like it was now? Was there a real urgency to get some of those songs out there?
There was, for me, just as I started writing them, I think I started writing Ghost right after the Hillary Clinton Donald Trump election. Sort of, it was my response to what I saw happening in that election cycle and what came after it. And I got dark for a minute, and I wrote this song. and working on it and recording it through the first term of Trump's presidency and watching the discourse that's happening here in the United States and then around the world, and having a blend of nausea and shame and disbelief and anger and just trying to also be hopeful at the same time, all went into writing that song and producing the music around that song. And so it just felt like, you know, the fact that we just finished it and the election's in 3 months, let's just put it out now. Why wait? Or just put it out now, get it out early. And Raging Hearts, the reason I wanted to put that one out next is because the way I set up this concept album is Raging Hearts was the sister track to Ghost of an Old Revolution.
This was, I was going to ask you about this idea of having each track's got a sibling on the album. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, how that works.
Well, that came about as I got more deep into the writing of the album. Each song I started writing individually, like I do all songs. You know, you find an idea, you get inspired, you run with it, and then you start pulling from all places around you and things we witnessed, put them into the songs. But as each song came together and I realized it started off, you know, the playlist for South of the Sky was 17 tracks. And we whittled it down to 12 of what we felt was the tightest piece of art. But as it started coming together, I started seeing recurring themes across the songs, where in a certain line or a certain image or a certain type of expression, and it was like, huh, that's interesting. Like, that's a very similar line to what I said over here in this song. And then the idea struck me, well, what if I lean into that and get a little bit more into the form of things and the craftsmanship of it, and less just about the free verse, and really try to build a piece where they actually are related. And I start tying imagery back to songs or foreshadowing in other songs. And I got lost in that. I had never done anything like that. And I just went way off.
That's really interesting to me. I found it so fascinating to do that, you know. That's but it's so you kind of have a side A and side B, and each track on side A has a sister or brother track on side B.
That's right. I went into the deep end. I mean, I was still tweaking lyrics after mixing. The mastering engineer had it and was mastering the album, and I would have to say, hold on, I just reworded that verse, and record the vocal track, send it back to the mixing engineer, have him fly in those 4 lines that I'd rewritten, and then have him send it back to the mastering engineer to remaster it with the new lyrics. I was driving my producer and the engineers crazy. Because it was like, they thought their work was done. You know, they were like, okay, good, we're done. And then I'd be like, I rewrote a line. We have to rewrite it.
And another thing.
Yeah, and it's like, it still said the same thing sometimes, but it was just a different way of saying it. And it was like, I'm tying it back to that 5th line in the 3rd verse of this song, and I want them to be connected, so I had to rewrite it. It just kept unfolding itself to me, like the way to thread all these songs together into this broader idea that I had. And I don't know if I was successful. You know, a critic may listen to it.
Did you get to a point where you thought, I've done this now? Or it feels like it's one of those things that you could just keep going and going and going and going forever, and at some point somebody has to go, Matt, stop. It's done.
I
mean, did you make that decision yourself, or was it or had you finished the process?
Lyrically, I finally came to a point there at the end where I said, okay, I'm done. I can't touch it anymore. Performing it, I had to be told it was time to stop. So, you know, and you haven't heard it yet, but the title track of the album, South of the Sky, I think it's the longest track on the album. It's like 6.5 minutes long. And there's this long spoken word outro on the back end of it. And I could have redone that 1,000 different times, 1,000 different ways. I want to inflect it like this. And that little synth thing happens, and I want to put the line there. And finally my producer, Truck Rowley, he just said, that's it, we're done. Like what you just ran down, we're printing that, and it's done.
And go away.
You're done.
I never want to see you ever again.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, with that spoken word thing, doing that I mean, I suppose you haven't done these songs live as such properly, but but are you is somebody that can do that kind of thing like on the fly? Like, can you, or do you have to be pre-written? Is are you able to kind of freestyle in that way, or almost like a rapper does, that kind of thing? Can you do that kind of thing?
A little bit, it's a great question. It's a complicated answer. In that example, in that take we ended up keeping, I did freestyle some things that weren't written, that I just off the cuff did. But that is a very different thing. Freestyling in that way, where it's more of like a free verse, spoken word liturgy of poetry and imagery, as opposed to like a cadenced, rhythmic, rhyming rap freestyle, where people are pulling together, like Juice WRLD or somebody's like pulling together a 10-minute long, coherent, rhyming in metered verse rap freestyle. I can't do that.
But you can do a stream of consciousness with no kind of structure to it. But I mean, that can really, live, you can imagine that could really build up and get intense, and you could really that could be really angry. I mean, especially with this subject matter Matt, you're going on with now, and you could really see that kind of being an interesting. You find yourself kind of morphing into this other character, like almost like Bono does,
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's like a character, and depending on how much, tequila I'd had before the show would probably determine how deep I let myself go into something like that.
And how much people can understand of what you're saying as well.
That's right. And I've gotten pretty disciplined about not getting drunk on stage like I did in my early days. When you're doing it just to get the courage up to be yourself and open up. And now it's more about a cohesive performance. But yeah, it's wild. If you let yourself go there, sometimes things will come out in the moment where the music has you and you're there in a dark room with a crowd, and that energy is just insanely amazing.
Yeah.
That energy is amazing.
That's what I was going to ask you about, the sort of live, because it seems like you've been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes in the studio, creating stuff. Have you had a chance to, before the COVID thing hit, had you had a chance to get out there and do a lot of these things live? Had you sort of tried out this new sort of sound live?
A little bit, but not the way I really would.
Not the way it is now. Yeah.
Like we only like Truck Roller and I, the producer, we went to New York. I took him to New York with me. I was up there on a business trip for Artist Growth, and I was like, fuck it. And I booked a gig at this club down on the Lower East Side. And so I said, just fly up with me, like bring a bass guitar and a distortion pedal, and I'll bring an electric guitar and I'll use their backline amp, and let's do Ghost and 3 or 4 of these other songs, just bass and an electric guitar and 2 vocals. So in that sense, we did kind of room test the songs, but not with all the synthesis and the driving drums and all those things that are on the album. Haven't gotten to do that yet. It would be fun if the opportunity presents itself for me to perform this album front to back the way I intended to be listened to an audience. I would not say no to that. But it would require a lot of work, I think, with the band to make sure that we had the transitions right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a live performance with some kind of even like a virtual performance with some sort of visual element to it could be really interesting. And the development of this, it feels like it's got more legs, places to go. It feels like it could really develop into some complete beast going forward. So that'd be really interesting to see that.
A theater piece or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And when I rehearse with bands, I tell them, even with stuff like the Renaissance Rodeo and other songs on Out of the Ashes, we would learn the song, and I'd say, okay, well, when we get to this point in the song, I'm going to start talking to the audience. You guys just keep doing what you're doing. Whatever you're doing at that moment, just keep doing it. And I'm going to start talking, and I'll weave my way back around. And when you hear me say this word, we immediately transition into the next song. And I don't know what I'm going to say in those moments or how I'm going to get to that word. But I just tell them, when you hear this word, drummer, stop it, count off, and we immediately switch direction. And it usually works out pretty cool if you're playing with really good musicians, and it allows me the ability to veer off somewhere where I'm out of control and I don't know exactly where I'm going or how I'm getting back. And it adds a bit of surprise, not only for the crowd, but the musicians. It keeps them on their toes, and they're like, where's he going with this? We don't know. How's he getting back? And then
I've seen Counting Crows do this. I mean, Counting Crows are great at this.
Yes.
Where they kind of, I mean, there's like 7 guys on the stage or something, and it never feels cluttered, never feels crowded. And Adam Duritz has that freedom to just go off on one. And then just when you think they've run out of steam or where's this going to go, then bang, they're all back in again. And it's like back into the bit, you know, I saw them do that once at the Royal Albert Hall in London. It was just absolutely the freedom that band has, and to do exactly what you're talking about now. And it's obviously built around Adam Duritz's kind of his poetry and his sort of the way that his vocal style is. But I found it really amazing. I find he's great for. I always find he's great for writer's block. If I ever get any writer's block and I listen to some Counting Crows and something unlocks somewhere, because his imagery and everything is just amazing. I mean, I really find that just crazy, you know. That really helps me with that.
Yeah, I saw them the night they released This Desert Life, that album. It was a CD release show at the Tabernacle in Atlanta. And I remember he started just talking, and he told this long story about when he first moved to San Francisco, and it just went on and on and on and on. And we were all standing there. And then without even skipping a beat, he just said, and you step out the front door like a ghost into the fog, and the guitar came in, and it was like, oh wow, my God. And it was like, how does he do that? And I think that's really what stuck with me. And I try to do the similar type of thing in a smaller way, transitioning in songs. But yeah, he was the master at that for sure.
Yeah, no, that's good. I could hear that. I mean, that's, I don't know. You've got your own sound. I'm not saying this, but there's definitely. I mean, I can see how that would, with the skills that you have, I can see how that would have. That when you say Counting Crows earlier on, I thought, oh, it's definitely something that you've it's influenced you. Yeah, great. No, I mean, I think it's just fantastic. That album particularly, that was one that when I with the writer's block thing I was telling you about. That's that album particularly that I'm thinking of when I say that. You know, helped me through many a dry week of lyrics.
No doubt. But, well, if anything's going to give you permission to like really reach for like, you know, set yourself free lyrically, like an Adam Duritz track will certainly do that, because he just goes all over the map, and it's really cool, you know. And I think that happens with artists is we see somebody do something and we go, oh, that I feel that, like I want to try that. And then we go and create our own little version of that. You know, the first time I saw Leonard Cohen, I walked away. Somebody said, "What'd you think about the show?" And I said, "It was on his big comeback tour in 2009, and I'd never seen him perform before, Leonard Cohen. And I walked away from that show, and they said, "What'd you think of the show?" And I said, "I feel like have been given permission."
Yeah.
I was like, I've never seen anything like that, and now I feel like I have permission to go be whatever the fuck I want to be, because that was amazing. You know? And then you're like, oh, I want to do that, and I want to try that, I want to make my own little piece of that.
Eddie Vedder does that to me as well. Eddie Vedder, I mean, I saw Pearl Jam live a few years ago, and it's the same sort of thing, you know, just like the way that band works is really different as well, and the way that it's just, and and it definitely, it's such a great phrase to say that I just feel like I've been given permission, because that's exactly what it is. And then you think, okay, well, I think I've got some elements that I could bring that into what I do, and that's all important stuff, and it all helps you to push the boundaries within yourself. And you know, whatever. I mean, your stuff doesn't sound like Counting Crows, but it's obviously an important part of the ingredients, and that's what it's all about.
No doubt.
So I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about artist growth, because it was you mentioned it earlier on. Because this is explain a little bit about it in your own words there, what it is.
Well, it started off as an iPhone app, and it was designed. We built it because we wanted to help indie musicians like ourselves, who were having a really hard time managing the behind the scenes back end of the business, the organization, the money, the reconciling, the scheduling, the coordination. It's a pain in the ass. And we were doing it all on pieces of paper and napkins and stuff that we would lose on the road. So it was really designed to be a tool to help early stage acts get their shit together. And we realized really quickly we weren't going to make any money doing that. And the company was not going to survive if we were trying to sell indie musicians, a $5 a month or $10 a month subscription to an app that helped them get organized. When you talk to a band in a club, they're thinking, how do I build my audience, not how do I get organized? And it was like, okay. So then what we did is I went to management companies here in Nashville who were managing real professional acts that were out doing proper tours and going all over the world, and they need organization. And so I said, hey, I've built this app and I can expand it if you guys would like a tool to help you organize better than Excel. And they said yes. And so we started expanding it and growing it, and it's still going 8 years later. And we have major labels who use it, under the umbrellas of companies like Warner Music Group and Universal Music Group. We have major global management companies that use it now, and it's become this big software platform for organizing all of the details around an artist's activity. It's really kind of crazy and cool.
I can see how that may have stunted your or delayed the album a little bit. I think you talked earlier on about it must have been pretty full on to get that to develop that and for it to find its feet and to find its place. But it sounds like a fantastic thing to have done, and that's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it really is needed. I mean, so it sounds like a great achievement to have done that, and now you're kind of back making the music again, having just solved everyone's problems. It's fine. It's fine.
Well, I'm working on it. But yeah, I'm glad we've made it, and we're a real company now with revenue, and we have 15, 20 people on staff, and it's great. And some people go fishing on the weekends, and I go down in this room and write songs and make albums. The reason I've been able to do artist growth for so many years, and that I still love it, as some people say, you're a poet, how can you be the CEO of a tech company? And it's like, well, building a company is and building a product, a piece of software, and designing it with a team is very similar to songwriting. It's very similar to building an album. All the same muscles get worked and all the same itches get scratched when I'm writing a song or when I'm in a design meeting talking about a user interface for an app. It's so similar. And so if you can open yourself to different formats of creativity, I've learned through this process that you can do anything. If as an artist, you can do business, you can do all kinds of things. You just have to find how to come at it where your creative spirit is able to sink its teeth into it. And then you're good to go. And all the other stuff is just exploration and fun. It's like different sounds, different concepts.
Awesome. That sounds like some great advice, especially at a time when artists are looking to do new things. It seems like a very timely piece of good advice there. So that could definitely, anybody out there that's watching this can take that on board. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, I can talk for days about how if you're an artist, you are an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, you should be thinking and studying the arts. They are related. They are married and connected. Entrepreneurialism and artistic pursuit are so similar, and they help each other so much. I'm a big believer in that.
Excellent. Right. Well, we're just going to finish up now with the recommendation. We always ask a recommendation of, it's the Need to Know Music show. So we always ask everybody who's an artist or a band that people need to know. This can be someone new, or this could be someone that's influenced you over the years. You can take it any way you want to, but what's your recommendation?
So I'll give you an artist who is not new to the world, but is probably new to almost everybody watching this show, or at least a lot of people watching the show. He's from Knoxville, Tennessee. He was the poet laureate of Knoxville, Tennessee for many years. I met him in the alleyway in this old neighborhood called Fort Sanders, where I flagged him down one night at 3 o'clock in the morning stumbling home from a bar. I was in my early 20s. He was stumbling home from a bar, and we crossed paths in the alleyway, and I called out to him, and he took me back to his apartment, and we stayed up till the sun came up drinking, and he got out his record collection and started playing the albums. And he was actually signed to John Prine and Al Bonetta's label, Oh Boy Records, back in the 90s. And Lucinda Williams is on his first album singing with him. He's published several books of poetry. He's a singer-songwriter. He's the purest Americana. He's like East Tennessee, Blue Ridge Mountains Americana poet. And his name is R.B. Morris. And
R.B. Morris, okay.
He's in his 60s now. And if you ever get the chance to see him live, you can go on YouTube and watch, videos people have taken of him performing. But he's one of those poets that completely lets go on stage and goes wandering off into the ether of nowhere, spouting poetry like a madman, and then somehow finds his way back to the groove. And I've learned as much or more from him as anyone else I've ever met about music and poetry. The man is, he's something to behold. And he's very well known in Knoxville and in East Tennessee. But when you get outside of that little geographic area, a lot of people don't know who he is or remember him. And I think it's a shame, because I think he's brilliant.
Well, I've never known anyone to fit the term "need to know" as much as you've just described then. So we'll put a link to his stuff in the description, and also to all your stuff, of course. Where's the best place that people can keep in touch with what you're doing and what's happening next year with all the forthcoming releases?
Oh yeah, Instagram. I'm a regular on Twitter, and then just you can email me easily through my website. But yeah, I love it when people hit me up on social media or email me and ask me questions and want to talk and connect. So it's just my name, just at Matt Urmy, you can find me.
Fantastic. Listen, thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It really has. And what's an amazing story you have, and the new album. I just feel like you're only just getting going on this next step. So wish you all the best with that. And well, hopefully our paths will cross again in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun to talk with you. And you're obviously a lover of music and writing. It shows, and it's just a joy to talk to people who love to listen and really listen and do it themselves. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Cheers now. Thanks, Matt. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers out. Bye-bye.